Story 1. My fiancé and I are getting married in a few months. From the beginning, I've made it clear that I didn't want any children at our wedding, and he agreed. Since there are no young children in our families, this decision seemed simple. We even specified on our invitations that the event was for adults only. Our venue also has a rule allowing a maximum of 5 children, as children can sometimes cause unintentional damage. About a year into planning, my sister informed us she was expecting a baby, due 2 months before the wedding. She jokingly asked if her baby could attend. We told her we would consider it, but our preference was still for a child-free wedding. She is also part of the wedding party. Last week, she called, asking for a final answer. Although her baby isn't due for a couple of months, we hadn't made a decision yet, but we suggested several alternatives. For instance, she could arrange a babysitter or have her partner's parents care for the baby for the evening, allowing her and her partner to have the night to themselves. Another option was for the baby to be present only during family photos or stay in a separate room during the ceremony. However, my sister insisted on bringing her baby, as she wanted everyone to meet him and felt uneasy leaving him with a sitter. I explained that I preferred not to have the baby there in case he cried during the ceremony. Also, I felt that a wedding might not be the best time to introduce her new baby, as I wanted everyone to focus on celebrating and having fun. I was also concerned that she might end up handing the baby to our mom, which could prevent my mom from fully enjoying the day. The next day, my sister texted me, saying she was stepping down from the wedding party. I thanked her for being honest and said I understood her perspective. I then asked if this meant she wouldn't attend the wedding at all, but I haven't received a response in over a week. I also clarified that I only needed her to stand with me during the ceremony, which would take about 20 minutes. She also chose not to attend my bachelorette gathering that week, saying she couldn't participate in the activities, which were a beach walk, coffee outing, lunch, and a painting class. I'm unsure if I'm overreacting, as I don't have children and find it hard to see things from her point of view. Some additional comments. No one is really at fault here. It's understandable that you want a child-free wedding, and it's equally reasonable for your sister to feel reluctant about being separated from her newborn. While introducing a new baby at your wedding might shift some attention away from the celebration, it's also important to consider that her child is a significant part of her life. Weddings and newborns are both major events. If your relationship has been strong, I hope you both try to move past this timing issue. After all, your wedding is one day, and her baby will only be a newborn for a short time. Everyone has their choice here. You want a wedding without children, and your sister prefers not to leave her newborn. It's good that she stepped away when she realized it might not work out. This situation isn't about who's wrong. It's about your sister feeling she's in a challenging situation. You're concerned that the focus won't be entirely on you. However, weddings are celebrations with loved ones. If you care about optics, keep in mind that people may interpret this as you excluding your sister because she doesn't want to leave her baby. That perception could linger regardless of any "it's my day" narrative. At weddings, guests often discuss a variety of topics unrelated to the ceremony itself, like the food, sports, their interests, and family matters. People might ask to see baby photos or chat about other things, and even the most stunning bride or charming couple won't be the center of attention every minute. Only by behaving with kindness and flexibility can you avoid seeming self-centered. You're not being inconsiderate yet, but being more gracious could make a significant difference. Story 2. I am a 33-year-old English language arts teacher who has been working in China for the past 3.5 years. Before I dive into the story, here's a little context. There is a noticeable pay gap between foreign teachers and Chinese teachers. While this is widely known, a few individuals sometimes take advantage of it if they sense an opportunity. This could mean anything from charging foreign teachers more at market stands to occasionally pressuring them into agreements. I've seen it happen, and some of these individuals are not apologetic about it. Now, onto the story. It was Chinese New Year, and I was on a train to Chongqing to visit a friend. I prefer trains over flights, so I chose this mode of travel. I was enjoying a movie on my Samsung tablet with my Bluetooth headphones when I felt a nudge. Turning to look, I saw a young child, possibly an elementary school student, watching the movie over my shoulder. I decided to be friendly and turned off my headphones, adjusting the tablet so he could watch along with me. It might seem unusual, but as a teacher here, interactions like this become quite normal. The child was thoroughly engrossed, even trying to communicate with me in basic English phrases like, "I like this," "so cool," and "me too." Despite the language barrier, his English was limited, and my Chinese was even more, so we shared a friendly exchange. When we reached our stop, he cheerfully waved goodbye and ran back to his mother as I packed up my belongings to disembark. Then, the unexpected happened. A woman approached me with the child and, speaking perfect English, demanded my tablet. She actually said, "Give me your tablet." I was baffled, feeling like I'd stepped into a surreal situation, and asked her to clarify. "Excuse me?" I asked. "Give me your tablet. I want my son to have it," she insisted. I responded with a simple no. She then uttered those familiar words I've come to dislike. "But you're a foreigner. You can just buy another one." To clarify, I had no idea if the child genuinely wanted my tablet, but that wasn't the point. Coming from a family that taught me to value my dignity, I wasn't about to let someone treat me this way. While I didn't need to be aggressive, I also wasn't going to allow her to intimidate me. I paraphrase here, as the exchange went on longer than necessary. I told her, "No, I can't. I saved up to buy this. You can do the same." She responded, "No, you can give yours and stop being selfish." I countered, "Or you can stop being entitled and buy your own." The look on her face was priceless. To add a bit of humor to the situation, I even gestured dismissively, saying, "Shoo, shoo." She walked away, but soon returned with a police officer. I admit I should have anticipated this, but my focus had shifted to leaving the train. Fortunately, the officer spoke fluent English and approached the situation with patience. "Sir, this woman says you stole her tablet," he informed me. I glanced over at the woman, who was smirking as she explained something in Chinese. Exasperated, I sighed, knowing I'd already spent too much energy on this nonsense. So, I decided to handle it the way I do when I need to make a clear point. I went into my ice teacher mode, as my students call it. Looking at the officer, I proposed, "Let's make a deal. I'll use my fingerprint to unlock this tablet. If it doesn't work, she can have it. If it does, I get to say my piece." The woman's expression turned to shock, and even the officer appeared taken aback. He asked if I was serious, and I assured him I was. Realizing her plan had backfired, the woman attempted to retreat, but I wasn't done. "Where are you going?" I asked. "I thought you said this was yours." She looked to the officer for help, but he seemed disinterested in prolonging the situation and calmly responded in Chinese. After a short exchange, she looked back at me, her face a mix of frustration and disbelief. "How dare you?" I said to her. "You had the nerve to try to take what's mine just because I'm a foreigner. That's shameless. You should be embarrassed." She stood there, clearly uncomfortable, and I asked one final time, "Is this your tablet?" She hesitated, then finally admitted, "No." As she gathered her son to leave, the child waved goodbye to me despite his mother's irritation, and I waved back with a smile. The officer asked if I'd really meant to escalate things, and I told him honestly that I wouldn't have resorted to any aggression over an object. He laughed, wished me a happy Chinese New Year, and we parted ways. Later, when I told my friend about the incident, we had a good laugh about the absurdity of it all. Story 3. So this happened to my mom and me around 2 months ago. Background: my parents and I live next to a park and several fields. During the lockdown, tons of people went out to go for a walk there, even though they should stay at home. The streets around our neighborhood are quite narrow, so they were crowded with parked cars and people walking on the street. Some lowlifes got aggressive when you drove past them, One sob slapped my window because he had to drag his lazy self onto the sidewalk instead of further walking on the street. I just side-eyed him and drove off. When you drive through our main gate, there's a 150 feet long driveway leading to our house and the garages. When we are at home, we usually leave the main gate open. This led to several cars standing in front of our garages and blocking the pathway. Most of our neighbors, my parents and me, were pretty annoyed by those masses of cars, and a lot of people left their trash on the ground too. Another important fact: during the climax of the lockdown, there was a law forbidding you to be in a group bigger than 2 people, except family, of course. Breaking this law resulted in a €200 fine. Story: my mom and I went grocery shopping. On the way back home, we were standing in our street, waiting for the gate to open so we could drive onto our estate. Then Mega Karen came along with her minions Karen and Mini Karen, each pushing their offspring in a buggy. There was enough space for them to walk past our car one by one, but it seemed like the trinity of Karens wanted to walk side by side. Mega Karen approached our car and knocked on the driver's window. I let the window down, and she immediately started yapping that we are not allowed to drive or park. I stayed calm and asked her if she's joking. "We are living here." She continued with her nonsense that we are not allowed to stand or to park here, and we should please move our car so she could get through. At this point, my mother stepped out of the car and explained to Mega Karen and her dumb minions that they could just walk around the car one by one. But apparently they didn't want that. This nonsense continued for around 2-3 minutes. Then Mini Karen stepped in to calm Mega Karen down, but that didn't really help. In fact, it got worse, because Karen came in and said my mom is a bad mother and human because she argued with a mother of a small child, and this would frighten the children. Well, my mother got really mad. She's a great mom, and she knows that. At this point, I started to chat with a friend and blended the argument out. My mom can be a pretty intimidating person, and she's great at provoking people when she wants to. So I knew she didn't need my help. After some time, Mega Karen started screeching that she was going to call the police on my mom. My mom knew she did nothing wrong, so she insisted. Mega Karen called the police and told them she was just walking here, and we started intimidating her for no reason, and she felt threatened and yada yada yada. A short time after Mega Karen called the police, one policewoman and a policeman arrived. Immediately after they got out, Mega Karen and Karen started telling them that we threatened them, blocked the road, etc. The funny thing is that the policewoman called knows my mom. Her husband was a patient of her, and they know each other from a local dog park. The policeman stayed with the Karens, then later, she came over to ask for our story too. After I did my statement, I asked the policewoman if I could leave. I needed to bring the groceries inside. She said yes, so I grabbed the groceries and went in. Around half an hour later, my mom came in with a big evil grin on her face. Apparently Mega Karen, Karen and Mini Karen wanted to report us for threatening them. But the policewoman turned the tables and told them that they violated a lockdown law and they need to pay €200 each. Apparently Mega Karen didn't like that, so she continued arguing with the cops. When they didn't do what she wanted, she got angry. She slapped the wing mirror from my mother's car, folding it forward, and scratched the car, tried to attack my mother and the policewoman, and called the policeman grabbed her a dumb son of a witch and told him to get lost, leading to her getting arrested. After her arrest, she tried to spat at my mother and told her she is gonna regret this and she will come after her. She faced charges for verbally and physically attacking a police officer, attacking and threatening my mother, and damaging my mother's car Range Rover in a special effect British racing green very expensive to repair. She also needed to pay the €200 for disobeying the lockdown law. Several weeks later, I heard from my dad, who's my mom's lawyer, that she had to pay a big fine, was on probation, and needed to pay the repair for my mother's car. A great thing though, she got a record leading to her getting investigated at her workplace. But the greatest thing, because she was divorcing from her husband at the same time, the lawyer of the husband used her little tantrum against her, so she lost the main custody to her child. Story 4. The story begins almost a year ago when I received a call from an unknown number on my cell phone. It was an automated message instructing me to call an 888 number regarding the delivery of legal papers. Immediately, I suspected this might be a collection agency. A quick internet search confirmed my suspicion. For some background, I experienced identity theft almost 2 decades ago. Even now, I occasionally receive calls from collection agencies attempting to collect on debts from over 20 years ago that were resolved. Typically, when these calls occur, I request their address so I can send a dispute letter with accompanying proof of my identity theft. Generally, they apologize and I don't receive further calls. They also typically mail a confirmation stating the account has been closed. When I returned the call, the experience turned out to be unusual. A woman answered, and I provided her with my information. She began listing a debt from 1995. After she finished, I explained that I had no knowledge of this debt due to identity theft. The moment I mentioned this, she became agitated, insisting the debt was mine and that I would pay it. I repeated my intent to mail a dispute letter, but she refused to provide an address. When I reminded her of my rights, she claimed I only had the right to pay. She went on to say she would place a lien on my huge, beautiful house and accurately described it. She also threatened a lien on my car, describing it as the one in my driveway, and dismissed the security gate at my home. Then she hung up. I knew she had likely accessed public records and viewed my home via online maps. My guess was that she'd tried intimidating others who didn't recognize this tactic. I had phone recordings of our conversations, legally obtained since I'd confirmed the call could be recorded for quality control purposes. I thanked her, interpreting this as her consent. Although I initially planned to let this go, the automated calls continued, and I couldn't block them as they were listed as unknown. My online search indicated the company was possibly based in Ohio. Additionally, the company's owner, an attorney, was reportedly facing legal issues. I filed a complaint with the Ohio Attorney General's office, but they couldn't locate any information based on my submission. They did contact the number I provided and assured me that the calls would cease. However, this was all they could offer. I also filed a complaint with the Federal Consumer Finance Bureau, who dismissed the case. 3 months later, I called the number again. I tried pressing different options in the automated system, hoping to gather more details about the company. This effort paid off when I pressed 0 and was directed to another company name. Searching for this new company revealed numerous complaints, leading me to believe they were based in New York. I submitted a complaint to the New York Attorney General with all my findings. Over the following weeks, I did extensive research, uncovering information about the company's owner, their address, and other details, even finding their social media profile. Shortly after, I received another unknown call from a different company name, confirming my suspicion that they were changing names while the same parent company continued contacting me. This time, I'd had enough. I hired a private investigator, who was impressed with the information I'd already gathered. I allowed him to proceed, and he discovered that the company was unregistered and managed by one woman, the same rude individual I'd been dealing with, who was allegedly operating an illegitimate business. I hired a process server to file a claim in New York, although I likely could have filed locally. I was planning a visit to New York to see family, which made the timing convenient. Serving her the papers proved challenging, as she was either not at her registered address or staying elsewhere. The private investigator then sent friend requests on social media to her and her connections. Surprisingly, she and some of her friends accepted, allowing the investigator to gather more personal information. We learned she had recently separated from her partner, who might help us locate her. We offered her partner $500 in exchange for information, and this led us to successfully serve her at her parents' house about 20 miles away. I flew to New York for the small claims hearing. Since it was a small case, only she and I were present, although her mother came along but did not represent her. I presented the judge with all my documentation, detailing how she had violated debt collection laws and issued threats over the phone. After hearing my story and how she had deliberately concealed her identity, the judge awarded me the maximum allowable amount of $3,000, which is the limit for small claims in small towns and villages in New York. After the hearing, I overheard her mother anxiously whispering to her, "You'd better hope he doesn't take your house. Your great-grandfather built it with his own hands." This comment sparked an idea. Although it would be satisfying to place a lien on her property, I discovered that the house had a second mortgage nearly equal to its market value, which would prevent me from collecting. Months later, I wondered how I could collect my compensation when my investigator informed me her house was entering foreclosure. I sent a representative to bid for me, but as is typical in foreclosure cases, the bank bought it back as a real estate-owned property. However, a few months later, I submitted a low offer, which the bank accepted, likely due to the limited market in the small town. You may wonder why I bought her house. Here's the reason: she had threatened to place a lien on my home without merit, so I ended up taking hers. It was immensely satisfying. The property is in decent shape and will make a cozy summer home for when I visit family nearby. To add a final touch, I sent a letter to her parents' address, informing them I now own the house. I explained that if their daughter hadn't been involved in questionable practices, they might still have their home. Since then, the New York Attorney General has started investigating her activities. I hope they take strong action. For those who no longer receive calls from this agency, you're welcome. Story 5. This incident happened last night, and while I was too shaken to write about it then, the hurt is still fresh, so I need to let it all out. For background, I'm 30 years old but often appear younger, and I suffer from severe chronic back pain, making it hard to move around without a cane or other support. I can't lift anything heavier than 10 pounds, and I also have autism, which makes it challenging to cope when I'm overwhelmed. I deal with severe anxiety that flares up during these moments. Doctors have yet to diagnose the exact cause of my pain, so surgery isn't an option until they can determine what's wrong. My pain forced me to leave my job of 5 years at the start of the pandemic, and for the past year, I've been on public health assistance after my work insurance ran out. I recently found a physical therapist who accepts my insurance, so this incident happened after my first appointment on public health. Last night, I had never felt more frustrated by my mostly invisible disability. My car was having issues, and since my family was unavailable, I took the bus home from physical therapy. While I was seated, a woman in her 50s or 60s boarded the bus. Seeing no spare seats, she zeroed in on me. She began berating me, accusing me of pretending to be injured because she noticed my cane. She demanded that I stand up and give her my seat, saying she needed it more than some insolent youngster pretending to be disabled for attention. She went on about how this was what was wrong with young people today. I tried to explain that I used my cane to help with my back injury and had just completed a physical therapy appointment that left me in more pain than usual, as they were testing my limits. Standing for the 20-minute trip back home wasn't an option for me. However, she wasn't having it. She accused me of lying, saying I was too young to have anything seriously wrong. Then, without warning, she snatched my cane and threw it to the back of the bus, telling me to stop pretending and to stand up and give her the seat. Without my cane, it's very difficult for me to stand, especially when I'm in pain and don't have anything nearby to help push myself up. I felt humiliated and frustrated. I began having flashbacks to my old job, where one of my managers would accuse me of faking my injury and resist every accommodation my doctor recommended. However, I'd never had someone use slurs and insults against me because of my disability. This woman continued to berate me, calling me lazy and suggesting that I was likely using disability benefits for drug money, accusing me of being a useless addict who was committing fraud. Shaking and close to tears, I just wanted to leave the bus and call my family to pick me up, but it was the last bus of the night. I struggled to get up, intending to use the seats to steady myself as I made my way to retrieve my cane. But as I tried, a wave of pain shot through my back, and I fell forward onto the floor. The woman jumped back, claiming I'd tried to attack her, and even kicked me in the side, yelling that I should be thrown off the bus and arrested. Everything after that became a bit of a blur. I was in tears from the pain and the embarrassment, barely able to focus. Other passengers stepped in, some helped me up, some shouted at her. One kind person retrieved my cane and handed it back to me. I clutched it tightly, feeling like Linus with his blanket, holding on to it for comfort. There was a lot of shouting, and even the driver came to see what was happening. Eventually, the driver ordered the woman off the bus. 2 passengers had to help escort her out as she shouted that I was faking my condition and posed a danger to her. Once she was gone, the driver closed the doors and approached me to check on my condition, while the woman banged on the bus doors, demanding to be let back in. The driver asked if I was okay, if I needed medical assistance, or if I wanted to file a report with the police. I was still overwhelmed and just managed to say that I wanted to go home, apologizing to everyone for the trouble, feeling like I should just get off the bus and let the woman have my seat. The driver gently placed her hands on my shoulders, sat me back down, and assured me, "You didn't do anything wrong. She was the one causing trouble, and I won't let her back on, no matter what." The driver then offered to call my mother for me. I recited her number, and soon, my mom met me at the bus stop. She thanked the driver, who offered to share the footage from the bus cameras if we chose to file charges. I'm still shaken from the experience, so we haven't made any decisions yet, but my mom is determined to ensure that this woman faces consequences. For now, she's just letting me rest. Story 6. Hi all. I remembered this story from a year or 2 ago, while browsing for a spotlight I could control from my phone. Not related to the story, but my dog has declared a personal vendetta against some foxes who keep triggering our motion-activated spotlight, which he considers a dire provocation. One day, I was experimenting with a faulty laptop's Wi-Fi card and noticed a new access point I could connect to that hadn't been there before. The signal was average, and since I had my own internet, I didn't think much of it and just ignored it. About a week later, while unplugging some equipment, I accidentally disconnected my wireless router. My phone then automatically found the next accessible Wi-Fi network, which was the same one I had noticed earlier. I wasn't particularly interested in my internet, but then my phone popped up suggesting I install various smart home apps to make the appliances work. I found it odd, as I know enough about it to be cautious with home automation and the potential for anyone to access your information. To my surprise, these neighbors had their garage doors, heating and air conditioning, interior and exterior lights, televisions, and even their refrigerator connected to a Wi-Fi network with no password. In the tech world, we call that not the best decision. After plugging my router back in to satisfy my suddenly internet-starved family, I decided to take my dog for a walk. Before leaving, I installed the smart home app, turned on one exterior spotlight, and looked for the house it was connected to, figuring they'd likely be nearby. My dog is a friendly 35-pound cockapoo with far better people skills than I have, and he's my sidekick when I have to talk to people I don't know. He's as intimidating as a wet noodle, though he thinks he's much tougher. I spotted the house with the light I had turned on, confirmed by turning it off, and saw it was directly behind mine, on the next street over. We made our way around to the house, and I knocked on the door. An older lady answered, someone who had probably raised kids, but wasn't quite a Q-tip, if you catch my drift. She didn't even ask what I wanted. She immediately melted over my dog, and her husband joined in after hearing her delighted reaction. After a minute of my dog enjoying the attention, I remembered my reason for being there. I asked, "So, how are you liking your new smart home setup?" They both looked at me, clearly surprised and a bit uncomfortable. The husband asked, "We like it just fine, but how do you know we got that stuff?" "Please don't take this the wrong way," I replied, "but you don't have a password on your Wi-Fi. My phone accidentally connected to it and showed me everything you'd set up." The wife tilted her head, and the husband's face grew more serious. Sensing I needed to explain quickly, I added, "I'm just here to let you know that you should really add a password to your Wi-Fi, or anyone could connect to it and control things, like your garage doors." The husband looked angry, about to respond, but the wife cut in, saying, "Oh, that's what the installer meant when he said we needed to encrypt the thingy, or something like that." We didn't bother with a password because it seemed like a hassle. The husband, now confused, turned to her, asking, "Encrypt the what now?" Not eager to set up their network for them, I said, "Okay, gotta go, bye," and quickly walked away. On our way home, about 2 hours later, I heard a knock at the front door of my parents' house. I live in the basement apartment. My mom came down, looking exasperated, and told me the police were there. Again. I hurried upstairs and saw Officer Dave. Not his real name, but the only officer in town at the time with enough tech knowledge to talk to me without getting a must-destroy nerd look. I greeted him. "Hi, Dave. What's—" He cut me off. "You promised you were done with this stuff after the whole Main Street thing. You promised, and now I look like a fool." Quick backstory. The traffic lights on Main Street had been horribly timed after some road construction. A friend and I reported the issue, but nothing was done. So we fixed it. He picked the lock, I adjusted the timing, and we locked up afterward. We got caught, but Dave convinced them to see if traffic improved, which it did, so I avoided jail time. I promised him no more shenanigans. "I haven't done anything," I said, confused. "Then why am I getting calls about you opening and closing people's garage doors and switching their lights on and off?" To be fair, that did sound like something I'd do for fun, just as a harmless prank. But then it clicked. I pointed towards the house and asked, "Did you get a call from the folks who live over there?" I only went over to tell them they needed to put a password on their Wi-Fi. The only thing I did was turn on a spotlight to figure out which house it was. That's all, I swear. "They don't have a password," Dave said, cutting himself off with a sigh and facepalming. I let out a sympathetic yup. He sighed, told me to stay out of trouble, and I waved goodbye. It turned out the husband had called the police with a vague description of me and my dog, and a different officer insisted on investigating. The couple received a call back instructing them to secure their Wi-Fi, and 2 days later, they finally added a password. Now, we all lived happily ever after, except that I still get the stink eye from the couple whenever I walk by. About a week later, I ran into Dave, who told me he'd had to warn them about calling the police over minor issues and dragging the cops into petty disputes. Story 7. Setting the scene in fair Verona, there once lived a pair of typical upper-middle-class American empty nesters. My older brother B and I both live in the same metropolitan area as said family home. We are both in our 30s, we work full-time, while our mother M63 is retired, and my father F62 works from home and will be in the coming year. We were raised with traditional gender roles firmly in place and a strong preference for my brother despite the fact that he abused me for 3 years in our childhood, a fact that is denied to this day, and later dropped out of school and started dealing drugs before finally joining the military to straighten out. While I remained a straight student who graduated and went on to a major university throughout caring for M through surgery, chemo, and radiation for breast cancer, while F traveled the world for work. The gender roles thing didn't really stick with me. Between the abuse and being raised in a very liberal community, I sorta turned into a raging feminist, and sometimes misandrist. What can I say? I'm not perfect. But nevertheless, it's a continuing pattern that I am expected to cook-bake for family events, or help plan or run errands for etc. Meanwhile, B is rarely asked to bring anything, and if he is, CX it always amounts to something he picks up from the grocery store. Today is my father's birthday. Rewind to a week ago. M creates a group chat with B and I, asking about getting together for F's B-Day. B replies that he could do something Monday night, which is a little annoying that he can't do something on the weekend, but we'll just let that one go. M suggests that we need to do it at their house since they have a dog with a recent epilepsy diagnosis and they don't feel comfortable leaving her alone at this time, which is more than fair. The conversation turns to dinner plans. M, knowing I have recently been to a peach orchard and have a bunch of peaches, a favorite of F's, asks me to bake him a cobbler, as is the usual family preference over cake. I'm happy to do this as I love baking, and I need to use my peaches. She also mentions getting takeout and coordinating with us to pick it up, which is fine, but I also already know I'll be picking it up. The subject drops until Wednesday when I meet M for a class we signed up for previous to all this. She mentions she's also making an apple pie for Monday, as B doesn't like peaches, which seems a bit overkill, as we could easily just have pie then, but sure, that's fine too. So this brings us to Sunday. I received the call from M to let me know that B said he'd be over at 6:30, and as expected I would please pick up the food. I politely ask, would it be possible for B to pick it up? And receive the response that he is coming from further away. I remind M that it's just that I have to make the cobbler after work because it's really best if it's fresh, and we don't seem to ever ask him to do or bring anything for holidays. She backpedals, saying that we can move the time to later, but really we shouldn't go too late as B works early mornings. I say we don't have to change the time as I would be forced to drive across our main shopping mall at 5:30 to get the food, leaving me only an hour at best after work to make the cobbler. She just says, I'm not going to call him back to do it now. I have reached my limit on pushing for this, so I say, it's fine, I'll figure it out. Please put in the order early in the day so they can plan to have it ready for me when I get there. And then calmly add, please try and think about what you are asking of me and him as we go into this holiday season, as this practice of expecting nothing more than for him to show up is really getting old. In 22 inches M's reply. Well, I don't keep notches on the bedpost. I ended the call. So here we are today, and I have just received a message that B's car broke down, and he won't be coming, so the evening is off. I feel bad for my father in this, and I'll be sending him a text, and I'll drop off the painting I did for him as a gift in the mailbox later tonight. Now excuse me while I invite my chosen family over for peach cobbler. The end.